What's up, guys? Welcome to Just for the Tech of It. I am your host, Drew Prindle, and I am here to bring you all of the weird and wild tech news that you probably missed this week. All right, let's start off with tasers. In a new study published this week in the Journal of Criminology and Public Policy, scientists from Arizona State University have shed some much needed light on how the high voltage bursts of electricity that come from a stun gun can affect the human brain. To study this, scientists took a very simple approach. They basically just rounded up 142 healthy, able-bodied volunteers and then had them take a bunch of different cognitive tests while they were in their normal state. Then, they shocked the piss out of them and had them take similar tests immediately afterward. What they found was that a jolt of electricity can seriously impair a person's ability to remember and process information. A large number of the test subjects showed short-term declines in cognitive functioning comparable to dementia, which raises some serious questions about the ability of recently tased police suspects to understand their rights at the point of arrest. These findings are super interesting because of the implications they could have for law enforcement procedures, but at the same time, this is probably one of the least surprising academic papers I read this week. Surprise, surprise, getting hit with 50,000 volts and crapping your pants in a 7-Eleven parking lot makes it hard to think straight. Thanks, scientists. Did you really need to tase 142 broke college students just to figure that one out? I lose my train of thought if I sneeze too hard. It's probably safe to assume that I'll have trouble understanding my rights if you tase me in the ass while I'm handcuffed to a telephone pole. It's common sense. All right, moving on, let's go to three-parent babies. Earlier this week, a panel of scientists released a report recommending that the US Food and Drug Administration approve testing for a controversial in vitro fertilization procedure that creates a human embryo with genetic material gathered from 2 mothers and 1 father. In other words, they're saying that we should allow doctors to make babies with 3 genetic parents. The procedure, which has actually been around for a few years now, is called mitochondrial replacement therapy. Mitochondria, if you recall from biology class, are basically the stomach of a cell. Just like your stomach breaks down food, mitochondria break down molecules to provide energy for the cell. But more importantly, they also happen to be the only part of the cell that contains DNA aside from the nucleus. The problem is that mutations in mitochondrial DNA, which you can inherit from your mother, can sometimes cause diseases. About 1 in 5,000 births has a mitochondrial DNA mutation, which can be passed down from generation to generation. So to fix this, scientists propose that we start using this mitochondrial replacement therapy thing. It basically works like this. Doctors take a donor egg containing healthy mitochondria and then use a super tiny syringe to remove its nucleus. They then replace this with the nucleus from one of the mother's eggs and then use sperm from the father to fertilize it. If all goes well, the result is a healthy embryo that technically contains genetic information from 3 separate parents. The interesting thing is that because mitochondria only contain a little bit of genetic information, you'd basically get 49.99% of your DNA from your mom, about 50% from your dad, and then 0.1% from your second mom. That would make for some really weird parenting situations. You'd have 2 parents with basically equal voting power, and then you'd have that 0.01% swing vote from mom number 2. Mom says you can get a nose ring, dad says you can't. And then third mom would be sitting there like the emperor in Gladiator, just like, no nose ring. 3 parents though, you know what that means? That means 6 grandparents. That's a huge, that's 50% more grandparent than any other kid on the block. That's 50% more knitted sweaters that don't quite fit right. 50% more birthday cards for $13. 50% more weird hard candy that probably came from the 1920s.
I just happen to have a couple of lollipops here.
Last but not least, let's talk about brain implants. A DARPA-funded research team has created a novel neural recording device that can be implanted into the brain through blood vessels, potentially eliminating the need for invasive surgery and the risk associated with traditionally applied brain implants. In an article published in Nature Biotechnology, researchers from the University of Melbourne describe results from a study conducted in sheep that demonstrates high-fidelity measurements taken from the motor cortex, the region of the brain responsible for voluntary movement, using a novel device that's the size of a paperclip. The creators are calling this new device a stentrode because it's essentially a mixture of a stent, which is a blood vessel repair tool that kind of looks like a Chinese finger trap, and an electrode, which is a device that measures electrical signals. This means that it can be implanted in the brain using catheter angiography, which is a well-established procedure that's far less risky than open brain surgery. So to put it in your brain, they start by taking a catheter and inserting it into a blood vessel in your neck. Researchers then use real-time mapping to guide the stentrode to a precise location in your brain where it then expands and attaches to the walls of a blood vessel right next to the activity of nearby neurons. At this point, it's just a proof of concept, but in theory, if it got better, this kind of technology could be used in brain-controlled prosthetic limbs. The device could theoretically pick up movement signals directly from your brain and send them to an accompanying bionic limb. That would be pretty amazing, but they've got a long way to go before this happens. The last thing anybody needs is a poorly poorly calibrated brain-controlled prosthetic. It's weird, every time I go in for a high five, my arms just start doing the Macarena. Yeah, last week Jimmy tried to hug his grandma and just crushed her. He didn't know his own strength. Yeah, I was just trying to sit down on the bus and for some reason my legs just decided that I needed to moonwalk up and down the aisle. That does it for this week. Be sure to tune in next week for more weird and wild tech news.